Such a good song. I don't know how many of you have a story like that song, or maybe even you're currently experiencing where God has spoke to you and you've come running to Him. We've been talking about in this series how we're going to have live testimony each week, and it just fits really well with the idea of sitting around a campfire and sharing stories, and so we're going to hear from people each week about a time in their life where God spoke to them and kind of rekindled that faith and that flame in their life for Him. I get the honor of sharing this week. So for those of you that have not really heard my story before or know, I'm going to share a little bit more than what each week's testimonies are going to be. I've never shared my story here, and some of you may not know how I came to do what I do here at New Hope. My story is not like that in that song where there wasn't a moment in my life where I heard God speak to me and I came running to Him. There was never really a moment where I walked away from Him. I've been a Christian all my life. I grew up in the church, grew up going to a Methodist church, and I remember singing out of the hymnals, loved singing the harmony parts out of the hymnals, and I understood the gospel and knew that Jesus had died on the cross and rose again, and that my understanding was that if I believed that was true and I tried to live my life like Jesus, that's what it meant to be a Christian, and that's what I grew up understanding in the Methodist Church, and didn't know that there was anything more to the Christian life than that. And then I went off to college. And a lot of times, this is where the story changes for people. They have a little bit of their life where they go through that rebellious stage and turn away from God and try and do things on their own, and sometimes even hit rock bottom before coming back to Jesus. And that's not my story. I was just telling Vince between gatherings that I always felt like I didn't really have much of a testimony because I didn't have any gripping thing like that in my life. I've just always walked with Jesus, but I think God can use that and too, and it can speak to people. And so I wanted to share today a little bit of my story. And so I went off to college, and instead of running from God, I actually grew closer to Him in college. I sought out a church as soon as I got there and found a group to get involved with. And boy, were my eyes opened in college to other styles of worship. The first time I went to church down there, walked in, and there's drums on the stage and guitars, and they're putting lyrics up on the screens and playing videos and things like that. And I'm used to holding a hymnal and singing with an organ. And so that was eye-opening, and I just loved it. It gave me a new energy for Jesus and for worship. I guess I really never thought of it as worship when I was growing up. It was you went to church to hear from God, and I didn't know it could be such a thing where you lift God up and sing praises to Him and worship Him. And so that was eye-opening. It was also in college that the guitar kind of stuck with me. I had tried learning to play when I was younger, and just wasn't mature enough. I kept quitting, didn't stick with it long enough, and in college, somehow it stuck. I had a lot of friends that played, and I actually went on a summer missions trip where we were just playing all the time, and that's where I kind of got over the hump and stuck with it at that point. But it's interesting to look back and see God working even then in preparing me to do what I was going to do in the future, because I wasn't thinking of that. I just was thinking of learning to play the guitar. As a matter of fact, on your scoop, it says the title for this week is Ulterior Motives. And I felt like my testimony fit well with this particular week, and I told Rob I'd like to share this week for a couple of reasons. And one is I had ulterior motives for learning to play the guitar. I've been a singer since I was about 7. Singing in the church, sang my first solo with the choir on an Easter Sunday when I was about 7 years old, and my mom ended up with a recording of that on a cassette tape, and months later we were driving in the car and the song played, and I had forgotten all about the song at that time, and it's playing, and I'm like, who is that? And she said, that's you. I said, I sound like a girl. Which, carried into junior high. There was times where my choir director had me sing the soprano parts because the girls weren't learning it right, and he made me sing it, and man, that was embarrassing. But no, I've been singing for a long time, and any choir that I ever sang in, I was always pretty much the loudest one in the choir, and you could always hear my voice. Even when I tried to blend in, if I watched a recording of it later, my mom videotaped everything, and I always heard my voice, and I'd always be like, why do I stick out so much, But no, I had ulterior motives for learning to play the guitar. I had no intentions of becoming a guitar player so I could get on stage and be part of the worship team that I was witnessing at college. I had started singing at different things. People would ask me to sing at a wedding or sing at a funeral or sing at this or that, and I always had to have somebody with me that played guitar or played piano because I wasn't going to go sing a cappella, and I didn't carry tracks around with me. And so my intentions were learn to play the guitar so I can accompany myself and sing for things. Little did I know that God was planning for me to know how to play guitar for different reasons. I went to college to be a math teacher. For those of you who didn't know, I was a high school math teacher over at West Holmes. I was a teacher for 13 years, taught at West Holmes for 12. And when I graduated high school, I wanted to stay connected to school things. I loved show choir. I was in show choir in high school and sports, and I wanted to stay connected to that stuff. So I decided, well, I'll become a teacher, and then I'll be right in that setting, and I'll be easy access into coaching, and so that's what I did. I went to school to become a math teacher, 5 years of schooling, and started teaching math at West Jefferson High School down near Columbus. Church was always still there, continued to be part of the church through college. Didn't play guitar, just would sing on the worship team. As a matter of fact, that's Jeanette and I met over in Millersburg at Skyview Ranch when we were in college. She knew who I was because I sang on the worship team, but I hadn't met her till we come up there, and it's kind of ironic that years later we're married and living just down the road from where we met, so that was kind of a neat experience. But first year teaching down in Columbus went well, was doing fine, was involved in church. We would really start getting involved with the Vineyard Church down there on the south side of Columbus, loved it. Was about ready to ask if I could be part of the worship team, and then had applied to the Tri-County educational office up here because I heard they needed teachers. And so I didn't apply to West Holmes, but they called me one day and wanted an interview, and I had to go get the atlas out. So, okay, where's West Holmes at? Okay, didn't even know where it was. And got offered the job there and didn't want to leave the church we were involved with. Just really felt like God had us in a good spot there. But the more I considered the possible move up here, I really felt like God was speaking to me and wanted us to be here. And we chose to live in Loudonville because it was easier to get to my parents, which were north of Ashland, and Jeanette's parents were in Dayton. And so being over in Holmes County, we just would have made it a whole lot farther. So we bought a house in Loudonville. And I started teaching here, and we spent the next entire year visiting churches and just wasn't finding one that felt like home, and really started to get frustrated with that. And then on top of that, the neighbors that we had become the closest with in that year of living in Loudonville, right across the street from us, were moving. They were leaving. And so we're like, man, this is just, God, why do you have us out? Why did you bring us out into the desert? We don't have a church. Our closest friends are leaving. Why are we here? And then found out that the guy buying the house across the street was going to be starting a church in Loudonville. And for those of you that know me, know that was Charles Hill, who started New Hope Community Church. And when we found out that was coming, maybe this is what we're here for. And when Charles moved in, he started coming over all the time. A real chatty guy, for those of you who didn't know him. And I thought at one point that he sat over there looking out the windows, watching because any moment I stepped outside the door, boom, he was over there talking to me. And I'm like, man, this really friendly guy, and could get kind of annoying, though, But I didn't realize that he had ulterior motives. Now, he's a friendly guy, and he wanted to develop a relationship, but I didn't find out for about 5 years later that he knew all along I was a musician. I had never told him. We had never expressed any interest like we were going to help them start the church or anything. We just, we would talk, and he'd talk about the church, and he never asked me to be a part of it, never asked me if I played guitar or sang, none of that. I had no idea. And it was after a couple weeks, and we had prayed about it, and I went and told him, I said, hey, Charles, we'd like to help you get this church started. I play guitar, and I sing, and I could help with the worship team. And he played dumb and said that'd be awesome, and took me in, and, the rest is history. But it was like 4 or 5 years later that I'm chatting with him one day, and he's like, I knew all along you played. My neighbor, who had sold him the house, told him that I was a musician, and so I found out he had been coming over trying to develop that relationship because he wanted to get me to come on board with the church. So it's kind of interesting how that played out. Let me get to the kind of the meat of this testimony. I want to share where God kind of got a hold of me and rekindled the fire in me. Because like I said, I grew up in a Christian home and was always part of church all along, even up through this point, and helped start New Hope and was part of the worship team ever since day one. But it was always just something I did as a volunteer, something I did extra besides, outside of work. And I had been teaching for about 8 years at this point. This is about 2008. And I'd been at New Hope for 6 at that point. And I can still remember this moment as clear as can be. We were headed to Dayton, where my wife's from, and we're on a stretch of road on I-70 between Columbus and Dayton. I can still remember driving there, and we're listening to an audio version of the book Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. And it was a good book, through 9 or 10 chapters, had good stuff, but nothing that really, gripped me or changed anything in my life. But it gets to chapter 10 or 11, and John is talking about how men need a sense of adventure, and men need to feel alive. And then he posed this question that it felt like God pulled out a megaphone the size of a truck and just smacked me with it. I really sensed God speaking when John asked this question, does what you do make you come alive? Because I had never really thought about what I was doing as far as my occupation and what I did here on the weekends. It was just I was doing what I did and what I loved. And but as soon as he asked that question, does what you do make you come alive, I instantly realized that the answer to that question was no. I enjoyed teaching for about 3 years, and then politics and other things in the education besides just being a teacher come into play, and little by little I was losing my enjoyment of teaching. And by 8 years in, it was just a paycheck to me. Anything I do 100%. I always give my best effort. So I was a good teacher, but I wasn't passionate about it. It was a job. I got up every day, went to work, taught kids math, get paid, and that was it. What I was passionate about, what made me feel alive, was being on the stage at New Hope, singing worship songs and lifting God's name in praise. And it wasn't until that moment that I realized that. And that's where God really started to rekindle the flame in me. And it was scary because all I ever intended to do was teach math and coach sports. I never intended to do anything different. So 5 years of college to prepare me to be a teacher, and then to all of a sudden now I'm going to quit doing it. That was kind of a scary thought. Even though I felt like God was really calling me into ministry, I thought, how can I quit teaching? That's what I'm supposed to do. But after some time, a lot of thought and prayer about it, and my wife was very supportive in whatever I wanted to do, and I finally came to the decision that that's what I was going to do. I was going to quit being a teacher and get into full-time ministry, but I did not feel God was leading me away from New Hope. I was supposed to be here and do what I was doing, but I was supposed to do more. But there wasn't a position available at the time, and so I kept teaching, and it wasn't for another 4 years that a spot opened up. So I continued to teach year after year, doing what I do, and knowing that whenever God opened the door, I was ready to walk through it and get into full-time ministry. And it took 4 years, but in 2013, I resigned from a 13-year teaching career and became the connections pastor here at New Hope, and I've loved it. I've loved every minute of it. Very different than what I did. I always talk about speaking like this. I spoke every day as a teacher, and it never made me nervous. I sing on stage. I could sing on stage in front of 2,000 people, and I wouldn't be nervous. It's just something I do. But to have to talk is totally different for some reason, unless I were talking about math. If you want me to give you a math lesson, I'd be totally cool with that, and I could do it right now. But to get up here and talk about anything else, it's hard. Even if I want to share something during worship, I try to prepare for days because I get really nervous about having to talk. I don't know why that is, but I love doing what I do here. I never regretted it, even once. And there's times like the past week and a half or so that things get stressful. You have your day-to-day things you do, and then you lose somebody in your church. And we've lost 3 people now in the past couple weeks that were pretty instrumental people in our church, and that adds different things to the schedule, and it makes things get crazy. And times like that, I kind of miss the schedule of being a teacher. I missed it a lot this past weekend. I hung out with a buddy that is also a teacher, and he's got the summer off, and I'm still going to work every day. And I used to tell people summer was my favorite season because I'm a teacher. Now it's just hot in the summer. But no, I love what I do. Now I can answer that question. What I do does make me come alive. I love to be up on stage, not because I like to be in front of people or I like to perform. I'd be just as content to stand right back there in that back room and play my guitar and sing from back there with wireless connections so that I wasn't seen. I just love worshiping, and I love leading others into God's presence. And I thank you guys for letting me do that and letting me share today. Appreciate it. Thank you.